thing that really impresses me about Dr. Will Flavell is that he is incredibly passionate about a couple of different things, and he works so incredibly hard on them. The first one is education. He is one of the few people I know that's gone off and earned a PhD and then continued his education afterwards because he's genuinely interested in learning so much and soaking up information. The other thing is how he goes out and helps people. And as a member of the Henderson-Massey Local Board out west, that's meant a lot of physical stuff over the last couple of months with everything that's happened out there. But there's also an element of trying to help younger people come through so that they can stand in elections and giving advice in that respect. As a former head of Māori at Rutherford College, he was a big integral part of the community there. And that has all fed into what he studies and what he's passionate about. So I was really honoured that Will was able to sit down and have a chat with me. I realise with everything he's juggling at the moment, he must be incredibly busy, so I very much appreciate it. I really hope you enjoy this interview. There's a lot of stuff in there to process, and I think some of these conversations are really important that should be having had on a larger scale than just on this one-on-one interview. So I really do hope you get something out of this. So this is really laid back and relaxed and totally informal. The reason I wanted to get you on here is because you do two things that really impress me, most people I know who have gone on and done something like a PhD, that's where they stop. It's like they've hit their target of what they were aiming for. They've got the qualifications. You keep learning, like you keep going back to education and doing new things and studying new things, and some fascinating things in there as well with what you're learning. The other thing that you do is that you take everything that you've learned and like it obviously accumulates, and that drives your passion for the work that you're doing within your community. And I'm like, I have to get you on here because that's honestly the most fascinating thing that I could think that somebody could do. You're picking up as much education as you can and you're using it in a really positive way. And I'm kind of wondering what drives you to do that.
Thank you. First of all, I have a love of learning.
Yes.
And so for me, I'm very curious about the world around me. I'm curious about how other people act, how other people think, how other cultures interact. That's why I really love being in multi-cultural settings, for example. I think that I'm blessed with the skills that I can support such diverse communities, and I love doing so. That's what I love to do. I love the idea of service. Using your skills to better your community, your whānau, the people around you. So I love doing that sort of stuff.
So are you still on the board, Henderson-Massey
Yep.
board? Because you were deputy chair, but you stepped down from that, didn't you?
Yeah. We made an agreement that I would be for the first half of this term.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would swap with someone else who really wanted to be deputy chair for the second half. I'll give you an opportunity.
Well, why were they so keen for it? Is it?
It's a power thing sometimes.
Okay.
When you're a chairperson, so chairperson at the time, the first half was, the Honourable Chris Carter, former Minister of Education. Yes. And so it was great to work under him. But I guess as chairperson, deputy chairperson, you're also privileged to a bit more information. Okay. You're privileged, and so with that, you're able to, I guess, do whatever you want with that particular information in your own job. So yeah.
Did it ever feed back into any of the other work that you were doing?
Oh, massively.
Oh, okay.
Massively. Yeah, massively. So for example, I was privileged enough to be in some meetings where we had meetings with the police, for example, looking at some of the cases happening in West Auckland, just keeping us in touch with how we can support issues around policing, for example, community safety and things like that. So the deputy chair and the chairperson are privileged to some aspects that typical local members aren't.
Okay, so having come from a place where we don't have local boards, because Hamilton has nothing like that, what is the position of the local board? How does it fit within what democracy does within an area like Auckland, for example?
Yeah, so Tamaki Makaurau Auckland has 21 local boards, and
something like 147 elected representatives across those boards and council.
Yeah, so if you look at all those related to the 21 local boards, you've got your governing body councillors, you've got those elected to the DHB, the licensing trusts, for example. So yeah, we're almost like mini city councils, because, for example, in my Henderson-Massey Local Board area, we've got about 127,000 people. So it's huge. So
Yeah,
the local board out here in West Auckland, is bigger than most councils around Aotearoa.
that's the population of Dunedin.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so like that's a huge area. I was talking to Richard Hills the other day,
Oh
the
yeah.
North Shore. It's 150,000 people on the North Shore. That's more than the population of Tauranga. It's insane, and I don't think people outside the city realise that.
It is insane. But the idea was, when the super city was implemented in 2010, it was supposed to be like a shared governance role. So they got rid of the other big council. So Waitaki used to be Waitakere City Council. They turned it into this massive city council and created all these different local boards. You can say that a lot of people here in West Auckland mourn the loss of the Waitakere City Council. Because we had our own character, our own way of doing things, and having to sort of now become this real wide generalized general council. There are issues with keeping that local feel to things. So it's been 10, 11 years now, and I think people are starting to get the idea of what local boards do. Basically, we make local decisions based on the power that we have as local boards. And there'll be issues around our community facilities, our roading projects, issues with lease for the different council buildings here, playgrounds, libraries, infrastructure. So yeah, quite a few things.
I think a lot of people don't realise just how much work goes into that. I can imagine that your workload just from the board is quite intense.
Yeah, it is. It is quite intense. So it's my third term now, believe it or not. So I was first
Wow.
elected back in 2013.
You would have just
And
moved to the city then, wouldn't you?
I was only a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just moved for a job at Rutherford College. I was head of Māori studies at Rutherford College, and then I got sort of shoulder tapped up. It'd only been a few months if I would run, and to be honest, I didn't even know what a local board was. I
Trial
never
by
thought I'd
fire.
run. Well, yeah, and I was against, and I put myself against others who had been, elected since the 70s, the 80s, so they were well known. So how on earth was I, this person? So I was young, Māori. So Māori don't usually get elected. How am I supposed to beat these wealthy, elected members? And so what I did, which they didn't do, is that campaign hard. They relied on their name alone,
Yep.
and so I door knocked for 7 months every weekend, and was able to beat incumbents, former mayors.
Wow.
And yeah, third term now. So yeah, it's been
well
awesome.
done. Are you doing a fourth? Have you planned that far ahead? Because it's still 18 months, I think, until the next one, isn't it?
So the next one is next year.
Oh, is it next year? Oh, wow.
Yes, next year. I'm going to think about it very carefully, because I also want to support other young, particularly Māori Pacifica. So we've never had Pacifica elected to the Henderson-Massey Local Board.
Really?
Considering that we're 22% Pacifica.
That's out of it.
It is. And I want to support more younger people coming through as well, because we need younger people. We need diverse voices at the decision-making table. Because when I went to a local board meeting just before my first election, there was no one under 55 years old. There was no Māori. There were no Pacifica. And I thought, wow, this can't be representative of our very diverse young community here in West Auckland.
So when you were first elected, did you feel the weight of that on your shoulders?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I thought, wow, well, you're the only Māori here, and you're under 30. I think it was about 26. You're 26 at the time, 26?
Whippersnapper.
Well, in that context, And it was very scary at first. And I did have I felt the pressure of Māori community, of the youth community, as well. And because it was my first time, the machinery of Auckland Council is huge. So it took me a couple of years to figure out how to operate in such a massive space.
So do you think you've made a positive impact?
I hope so. I hope so.
And it's always a hard thing to tell when you're still in the middle of it.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, for example, I want people to be able to look at me and say, you know what, if he can do it, I also can do it. I don't have any particular special skill or anything. I'm just someone who really tries their best. And I always rely on their extra effort and hard work over talent. And so I hopefully can, really motivate others to be able to put their names forward. Because that's the most difficult first step, is actually putting your name forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last local election, there was a groundswell of youth candidates or younger candidates around the country, which was fantastic to see. Did any of them approach you about, how to go out there and tackle a local election?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot, particularly a lot in the last few months, actually, who are planning for next year, because you actually have to plan a year in advance.
Yeah.
For example, you need to be able to find the campaign money. So that's for billboards, that's for letters, that's for leaflets, etc. You actually need a really good campaign team around you. So this is something you can't do alone. You actually need people around you that could be friends, whānau to support you. But if you're a newbie who doesn't have sort of like a community, if the community doesn't know you, that could be quite a struggle too. So you actually have to really get out there and really campaign properly. So,
any advice for them in terms of what works in reaching people these days? Has it changed from when you first got on the board, or have you noticed it evolve?
I use a combination of both social media and getting out there. You cannot just simply rely on social media to get elected. That won't get you elected. So we've got very low voting turnout as well. So, for example, in West Auckland, it was around about 35% voting turnout. That's postal.
Mm-hmm.
So people who are older, who own their own home, who are Pākehā, are more likely to vote.
And that's a nationwide thing. But that tends to be a nationwide thing.
Yep. And with the postal voting, because there are so many families that have to move out of, constantly move. It could be due to high rent or owners wanting to, move into their homes again. So people who are likely to move around constantly are not likely to vote. A very low voting turnout. I'm for the idea of voting online. I really want to push that. I think that is the way. Or possibly, if you match up voting of local government to central government, let's actually have that same seriousness. Let's advertise it on TV. Let's have a one full day of voting for your local government members, but actually have a few also days leading up to that particular day. So, because local government's just as important as central government, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think many people realise just how many different areas of their lives that local government impacts. Otherwise, they'd probably be a little bit more enthused about it. I know when you're dealing with somewhere like Kirikiriroa, it's the city council that's in charge of all of the elections, and they do all of the marketing to go out there and get people enrolled and get them voting and stuff like that. Is that the same for the local board? Does the Auckland Council organise that, or does the local board have some impact in how they get people enrolled and voting?
Yeah, so that's definitely an Auckland Council. Auckland Council, because the local boards are Auckland Council. So it's people have sort of separated. The local boards are different from, say, your city council, Councillor Richard Hills, for example. We're all council. We're all council whānau. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Auckland Council does take charge of advertising to get people to vote, particularly young people and those who wouldn't normally vote. That's the most difficult challenge.
It really is. I don't know of I think there's maybe 2 regions in the last local elections that increased their voter turnout from the previous years. Like it's an uphill battle for everybody to get everyone out there and having their say. And those places had polarizing figures that were running. They had candidates that were just generally horrible people that nobody wanted in, but they got in because of low voter turnout. So it must be a hell of a juggling act.
It's, yeah. So every time I look at the election time, there are 8 positions available in the Henderson-Massey Local Board. You usually have around 28 people going for 8 places, and you probably need around minimum of 8,000 votes in order to get in. I would assume. So it is quite challenging. It is quite difficult. But you just have to really put yourself out there. And as someone, I call myself an extroverted introvert.
Yep.
So I'm not a natural person to put myself out there, but I can do the job.
You do it really well, though.
Perhaps a little bit of that can be acting skills, but I actually have to. It's not something I feel naturally comfortable with, putting myself out there. There are a few anxious times during election periods, but I know that if I really want to get elected, I keep my mind on the end goal.
Yeah. How much trouble do you get into with like physically getting up and talking? Because obviously there'll be meet the candidate events and stuff like that. That's where you will find the people who are the most enthusiastic about issues. Have you ever come across any problems where you're being given blatant false information, or people are just in your face about something that's completely inconsequential, where you have to sort of respond on the spot?
It's interesting. So a lot of the questions that get posed to us even now is on the community Facebook pages.
Yep.
And sometimes I think, oh my gosh, how did you make this stuff up? And it's really bad sometimes. I think, oh, where did you get this information? In the beginning, I used to respond to people's fake news on social media, but I tend not to now, just for my own sanity reasons. I thought, you know what, actually don't even bother conversing with this particular person, because I've got a particular angle. They're never going to change their particular mindset. But yeah, those meet the candidates meetings are always interesting. There are fewer and fewer of them as less people actually tend to go to these meetings.
That's
you
true.
have the same sort of people that do attend, and it's sort of the older people, but it's really important to show face anyway.
Yeah. And what fake information at the moment is everywhere. Like it's really horrible out there at the moment. You've come out as an advocate, obviously, for vaccination, and I'm guessing, are you fully vaxxed? 1 shot?
Absolutely. I know both. Yeah. About 6-7 weeks ago.
Okay. See, I've only had 1 shot. I had mine on Friday last week. So I scheduled it before everything happened, and then I thought, well, no, if I'm home and I'm not in any trouble, I'll just wait and not overflow the system. How much misinformation do you get sent to you as an elected person going, why are you not doing this, or why are you following it? Do you get anything like that from people out there?
Yeah, so I get the odd email, I get the odd private message sent to me about that. I look at my particular friends on Facebook as well, even old school friends, and I think, wow, why are you doing this? Because people talk about our freedoms and etc., but actually we've got to think beyond ourselves. And so for myself, I think about future generations, about future grandchildren, for example, trying to make it better for them. And so that's what our aim should always be, to make the next generation better than our current generation. So I want to ensure that we're at least 90% vaccinated. I think that's a really good number. I love to travel, Paul. And
yes,
so
I know.
I'd like to travel one day.
You had to cancel your trip to Rarotonga, didn't you?
I did.
That's got to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I love to travel, and that did hurt. But I know for the betterment of our community, of our nation, that actually it was the right choice to do. So hopefully go back next year sometime.
Everything will open up soon. I'm sure of it. Like everything seems to be getting under control despite yesterday's numbers, and we can sort of see where everything's going. So, touch with it. You can travel soon.
And I really like the idea the Prime Minister was talking about the trial of the MIQ at home.
Yeah, I thought that was a really clever way of doing it. A really impressed way of doing it.
I think that there has to be the way as well.
Yeah.
We look at the burden that many hotels and facilities are experiencing, and actually it does make sense to be able to do so from home. So I'm looking forward to how that trial will eventuate.
Yeah, because it's low risk people anyway that they're looking at having involved in that trial, people who are already vaccinated and have been to low risk places. So it makes sense that that's sort of the next step that we go for. It's You guys don't have any MIQ hotels out your way, do you?
Not out West Auckland, no.
No, they're all sort of central and south, aren't they?
Yes, yeah.
But West Auckland has had a hell of a last couple of months.
Yeah, oh man. Where do we start? From the floods, from the floods to the horrible incident in New Lynn. The floods are really concerning. I remember that night very well because
you were up for most of that night, weren't you?
I don't usually stay up till that night. I thought, okay, and then I was reading all the Facebook, posts in the community about cars and streams, cars being sort of moving on
being
the water,
washed away.
Yeah, so I made sure that I was on the phone with Auckland Transport. What could they do in terms of alleviating the pressure of the water on the roads? People were had to leave their homes, so it was great that we had an emergency centre just down the road, the Henderson Council chambers. It was a really bad incident. Bad flooding, but a lot of the people have been able to go back into their homes now. There's still a few roads out in the Waitakere Ranges area which are really bad at the moment that the work people are still working on. But hopefully things will be better.
And what's the train of information that comes through to you as an elected member for that? Like, do you get a phone call going, we need your help, or just letting you know this is going on, or was it no, I'm watching the news and holy crap, I can't believe this, I've got to jump into action?
For a local board member, you just have to jump into action.
Yeah.
And it's really important to do so because we are paid as representatives of our community, and that's our job, to support the community where we can. So you just have to jump in there, and so ensuring that I can be in-between person between the community and what the council can do to offer support. So it's really more of that was more of a council issue rather than say getting your local MP involved. It would be a council representatives would be more ideal people to work with.
And from what you can tell, everything is sort of back to normal now for most people?
Yeah, for most people. I mean, they're still working on some of the, I don't know if you saw some of the big pictures where roads were collapsing, for example. It was massive. So people have been out there every day to fix those particular issues because that stops access into particular parts of that area. Very scary to see, but things are getting better.
Yeah. Is Linmore within your ward?
It's just a kilometre out, but I use Linmore all the time.
Yeah.
I use it all the time.
Yeah. I was talking to Deborah Russell the other day, and she was like, that's just where everybody goes. It's the community hub to go do your shopping and get your haircuts and everything like that. What was that day like for you? Like, were you sort of given a heads up, or was it another, it's on the news and, oh crap, what do I do? And can you do anything?
I had a particular online event that I cancelled because I really wanted to focus on this particular event. So I know the community very well. Before I moved into the new house that I just bought this year, I lived close by to New Lynn, so I was there most weekends, for example. And so to see what happened in Linmore, it was devastating. And I had to jump in, talk with my colleagues to see what other support we can do. But it's very concerning. But they did the right thing, and we actually have to look at what do we do now, because the police did have information, the police were following this particular person, but how can we ensure that this incident doesn't happen again? I think that's the next question.
Parliament this morning passed the Anti-Terrorism Act, planning terrorist acts and things like that are now considered illegal. It gives them a bit more power that they didn't have beforehand, so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. I'm genuinely impressed with how fast that feels like it's happened, but I know it's been in the works for a couple of years now. And you work very closely with the Labour Party. You're very closely affiliated with them. You're on their policy council, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I am the chair of the Justice.
The Justice?
Yeah.
So what does that involve when it comes to sort of policy planning the rest of this term, looking at next term, how the country changes in the middle of things like lockdowns and outbreaks?
Yeah, so with the Justice Policy Committee, so what we do, so earlier this year, for example, the Labour Party had their regional meetings across Aotearoa and sort of come up with remits on that, what they would like to see the Labour Party implement for the next general election. And so our focus was to collate all the justice-based remits, proposals, policy proposals. And so I've been working as the chairperson, I've been working with the other committee members on the Justice Policy Committee to look at ones that we think should go ahead, or those who think a few question marks on some particular proposals. And then what we've done is we've worked with the different ministers on their views on their views on what they're doing to actually propel some of these policy proposals, because they could be already working on some that they haven't told us about yet. So the idea is basically to involve Labour Party members, to get them involved in shaping what Labour could be pushing forward for the next general election.
So this is very much a planning for the election kind of process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
How did you end up with justice? I would have thought education would probably be more the policy area that you would let you focus on.
I don't know if you know Barley Hark.
No, I can't say
Barley Hark, he's the maestro in education. He'd be my top 5 education people in this country in terms of so a former principal, has massive knowledge in NZQA. He's written books on how we could change the education system. I haven't written a book yet, Paul. So,
you've got time.
So naturally he's leading that particular committee. So I took on justice. So I am doing some study on a Masters of Criminal Justice and Criminology. So it's been able to match some of the new learnings that I've been taking on at AUT. I'm enjoying the challenge. It's good. It's actually good to go out and to do something new as well, because education has been my focus for so long. And it's like, this is different, and I'm really enjoying this part.
And which came first, going back and studying criminology because you had that justice portfolio, or studying criminology and then stepping into the justice portfolio?
It was really weird because I got accepted into the criminal justice program late last year, and there was no way that I thought I would be the chair of the Labour Party Justice. There's no way. I wanted to go in with I wanted to be the education chairperson. But when I saw Barley put his name, someone who I've looked up to for 15, 16 years, he was a natural fit. So, okay, cool. And I had this opportunity and I'm taking it on board.
Makes sense. And you're obviously enjoying it.
Yeah, so Paul, I'm actually looking at basically if there's a connection between schooling experiences and those who commit crime as a young person.
Okay.
So basically, is there a connection between youth offenders and some of their experiences at school? And so that's my focus for this year. It's
You've
really
spoken
interesting.
quite extensively, haven't you, on how passionate students are when they come to school and learn, and how that sort of drives them to keep going to school, and versus having a bad experience at school and not wanting them to go get that education.
Exactly. Yep. And if you look at our current prison population in New Zealand, you've got 70% of particularly Māori males who have poor literacy skills. So you can already see right there that literacy, if you're not performing academically at school very well, you've got a more likely chance of entering the criminal, the criminal justice system. So there are issues that some schools need to actually tackle. We have to get rid of a one-size-fits-all approach. It does not work for a lot of our kids as well.
Yeah. Do you find, as somebody who has taught Māori and has led that in a school, that languages in particular become that kind of focus point as well? Like I remember when I was growing up and going to high school, there were, I think, 3 language choices, and it was Māori, Japanese, and French. And you didn't have to take a language if you didn't want to. The people that took Māori, they were generally doing it because that was their history and they wanted to learn a little bit more about their whanaungatanga. But for other people, it was French and Japanese. And that to me felt like a really weird, for a small country town, a really weird thing to tell people that you have to learn French or Japanese or Māori. How does that all sort of come together to create the people that go out into society and make changes and or make choices that end them up in the criminal justice system?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So we just passed 30,000 secondary school learners of Te Reo Māori for the first time.
That's
So that's
impressive.
huge, and that's impressive, 30,000. And a lot of those students are non-Māori students. So I did my PhD on the learning experiences of non-Māori students learning Te Reo Māori. But in terms of particularly Māori youth offenders that commit crime, there's also a lack of cultural awareness as well.
Okay.
So identity is something that a lot of them talk about. They want to know who they are, but they haven't been able to access who they are as Māori. So that could be, for example, maybe perhaps urban Māori who haven't been able to go back to their rural marae, for example, or urban schools not doing a good job at supporting Māori cultural identity. That could be racism in schools, bias against Māori kids in schools. So yeah, a lot of different issues.
How on earth do you sit there and pull the threads? Because it sounds like there's a lot of, it's a tapestry of sort of concerns and histories and experiences. How do you, as somebody who studies this, pull the threads to find the core of it?
Yeah, I guess well, I've been lucky, for example, in that I have gone into Auckland University. So I've been a guest lecturer at Auckland University for the last couple of years on what's the best way to teach Māori students. What's the best way to understand Māori students? And when I was talking to 200 plus student teachers, I said, because I conduct a lot of interviews with Māori youth, Māori rangatahi Māori tell me that they talk to me about their favourite teacher and the qualities of their favourite teacher. A lot of them talk about their favourite teacher being non-Māori. So I have to tell these student teachers that you do not have to be Māori to be an effective teacher for Māori students. You just have to show these qualities of caring, understanding, actually using their culture to inform your curriculum planning, things like that.
Is that actually, because again, not being an educator myself, it's not something I would have considered, but is it something that a lot of young educators are sort of sitting there going, right, how do I approach Māori students? How do I make sure that they feel included? Or are they sitting there going, how do I be the most effective all-round teacher I can be for, no matter where my students are from?
I think it's really cool that a lot of the newer teachers are actually wanting to really tap into this, because at university, basically they're taught that there has been many decades, many years of underachievement for Māori students in particular, And so I know that these teachers will be coming in and saying, I want to be the best for all my students. And if I can find a way to be an effective teacher for Māori students, I want to learn how to do so. Because when Māori students are doing well, everybody does well.
That makes sense. You've got to get everybody involved at some level to make sure everybody gets lifted up at the same time.
Yeah.
In terms of non-native Māori speakers, say migrants coming in from overseas, learning the language, I've got an ex who was very specific about wanting to make sure that he learned the language, that he was really specific about making sure he got the pronunciation right. Filipino, so had a really strong accent, but still a lot of the language elements were the same. So the way that words were pronounced were really similar between the two languages. Have you found an increase of people who are like, yeah, no, I want to get involved from all sorts of different backgrounds and wanting to pick up a little bit more te reo?
Absolutely. And working in school environments, for example, the teachers who are from overseas are actually, I felt, there is more motivation from them to wanting to learn more about Te Reo Māori than the other teachers. And I only say that because they don't have that additional, when you're based in New Zealand and you're used to things Māori, they're not used to sort of the stigma attached to Māori at times here in Aotearoa. So they come from with no baggage attached.
Okay.
So they see this culture, they see this language, go, wow, this is really cool. I want to learn this as someone who knows very little, because I've come from overseas, compared to those who are like, they've grown around it. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Who aren't as motivated or excited to be learning about Te Reo Māori.
But that makes a lot of sense, actually. That's actually really cool to hear. Like as somebody who's studied this and who this is your passion, how do you feel about people sort of looking to you as a community leader on this? Do you feel like a community leader on this?
I think that you just become a default community leader when you're like, when you're the head of Māori studies at a high school, because I always feel that high schools sometimes the heart of a community at times. You are almost like a default Māori leader, and I've accepted that. I accepted that from a very young age. So when I was 22, for example, and so there are pressures with that. Particularly if you don't come from the area as well. I'm not from West Auckland, but I've done my best to really sort of make a difference to our young people as a teacher, but also the community as a local board, elected Auckland Council local board member. And so what we're seeing, attitudes change in our community, and it's really beautiful to see, actually. We're looking at building a marae in Te Atatu Peninsula.
Oh, wow, I didn't realise that. That would be an amazing addition to have out there.
It would be. It's been a 50-year battle. I think about 25 years ago, there were a lot of people who didn't want that marae. I remember back in 2012, 13, when I first moved here, I heard a comment at a community meeting about the marae. Someone was saying that, it would bring more gangs into the area, just stupid, silly comments like that. But it is likely to happen. We're hoping next year, but we'll see how things go.
That's a long process. 50 years is a long time to be fighting for something like that. The people behind it must be incredibly passionate about getting it up and running.
Yep. So the people who are leading it now, it was their parents, their grandparents who fought the fight at the beginning. Because what you will see is that you see in West Auckland, a lot of the Māori living here were migrants from rural areas. So the rural urban drift. So a lot of the Māori community here had moved from, say, Gisborne, for example, after World War II, to find job opportunities, education opportunities. So they moved to the city, and they wanted a cultural feature that sort of aligned with their views as Māori. And obviously a marae is it. So hoping for next year.
Okay. And whereabouts is that in the process at the moment? Is that something council has to sign off on? Is there, have you got building designs or?
Yeah, we have. We are probably,
You're just basically waiting for someone to say yes. So
we're 95. So the local board has come back to the local board for one more time. We're 95% there.
yeah,
There's just a few issues with driveway consent issues because basically, yeah. Well, this is a public park, right?
yeah.
So the marae space will take 2.5 hectares of their public park space. So there were issues around that. That's been sorted. So you're looking at issues around the driveway access and how that would be. It's a park with a lot of bird life as well. So I want to ensure that that less environmental damage is there. So what ways and I know the marae committee are working on that to sort of have that really good balance.
It sounds like every detail has been taken on board.
Yep. I mean, details were there 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, there was a model there 15, 20 years ago. So it's been a while.
Is that one of the sort of dream projects that you'd like to get sorted before the next election?
I was hoping it was the election beforehand. So actually, the plans were to give it the big tick in Matariki this year.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. But so there seems to be a new issue each time. So with Matariki as a public holiday next year, I'm crossing my fingers that we can tick it off and sign it. The local board can sign it off, and we can hand over the piece of whenua, the piece of land to the community. Say, here you are.
That would be an amazing way to celebrate the first Matariki, the first public holiday. It'd be absolutely brilliant. How long does it take to build a marae after they get the consent and everything signed off? Like, I've never been involved that much with building anything.
a bit like me.
You build futures. There's a difference.
There's a lot of funding, as you know, and so I know that they have plans to fundraise a lot of the money and resourcing and sponsorship, for example, for the marae. So they're working on that because it does cost a lot of money, but hopefully as soon as possible, really. I think that's what we're doing now, is trying to gain traction on getting the necessary funding to support it. And it's going to be a beautiful marae too.
Sounds like it. I'm looking forward to coming and visit. You'll have to give me a tour because I don't head out to West Auckland all that often.
You're missing out.
I know. I'm on the shore, so I get stuck around a whole bunch of old, creepy, racist white people. It's terrible. It was honestly the biggest culture shock for me moving up here was just how nasty some of the locals could be. And the further north I went when I was working in Silverdale, honestly, it was horrible having to be there. We got broken into in the store that I was working in up there. And I was at my grandmother's funeral when it happened. I had to come up for it. The cop in full uniform comes up to me and he goes, what you need to do is get yourself a shotgun. Well, we're a shop. We don't carry shotguns. That's not going to happen. If you see any Islanders show up in a Suzuki Swift, you just pull out that shotgun and you take aim, because tell you that's what they do and they come in here to raid you. Like, you're a cop. What the fuck are you talking about? He goes, this is all off the record. Like, dude, you're in uniform at a location of interest. This is not off the record. Like, it's just, I find that sort of thing really abhorrent. Like, it makes my skin crawl dealing with stuff like that. But I don't think I've seen it any worse than I've seen it here in the North Shore. Like, it's awful.
That's really troubling, and particularly when a lot of the young Māori in Pacifica, haven't had great experiences with the police.
Yeah.
And that's really troubling. There were, I remember a news article where police saw these two 8-year-olds Māori. They went up to them and took photos of them on their phone. They hadn't done anything. They hadn't committed anything. And so they got in trouble as a result of that. But yeah, I mean, I know the police are trying to do better in terms of relationships with our Māori Pacific communities. But your example there just says we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, it's painful to watch. Like, it's really painful to watch, especially coming from somewhere like Hamilton, where you have a larger Māori population than you do here. It feels so out of place to see something like that happen in this country. And it just, it annoyed the hell out of me. It was not fun. 2 more questions for you. So, being a Westie, I've been told any Westie politician I talk to, I have to ask the most important question you can ask a Westie: Holden versus Ford.
Well, you know, that's a really interesting question. I don't fit the West, the Westie stereotype really. But if I was to go, I'd go Ford. Absolutely.
Why? Is there a logic behind it?
Well, because one of my friends has a Ford, so I'll go with that reason.
But you can't get Holdens anymore. They don't make them anymore.
Okay, well, that's news to me.
Yeah, and they stopped them a couple of years ago. They couldn't get the parts, and that's why the cops now using Skoda, I think it is, because they can't get the Holdens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the last question I've asked everybody: what advice have you got for people who are getting through lockdowns and various level alerts and pandemics, just to help them sort of get through the rest of the process? Like, obviously, we don't know how much longer we've got to go with this, but everybody's processing it differently. Everyone's got different challenges. What sort of advice would you give to people to help them through it?
I mean, for me, I make sure that I do 90 minutes of walking or physical exercise. I have to. So if there's an opportunity to put the laptop down, turn the TV off, put your phone down, and actually go outside and go for a walk, that's really important. It's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. So you have to look after your physical side of your health. So I really encourage people just to go outside and go for a walk.
I want to thank Dr. Will Flavell for taking the time today to have a conversation with me. I'm fully aware of just how busy elected officials can be, and when you're dealing with so much stuff going on all at once, as every elected official in Tamaki Makaurau is because of the lockdown, as well as everything that you're doing yourself, like Will with his education stuff, it's unbelievable how stressed you can be and how thin for time you can be. So I just want to make sure everyone knows how incredibly grateful I am to have Will on the show. I'll make sure that there are some links in the description down below, so if you want to, you can check out some of his social media platforms. But I'd thoroughly recommend doing some research as well into the work that he's done and some of the guest speaking bits that he's done as well, and some of his media appearances, because Will is fantastic with communication and getting his message across in a way that everybody, I think, can understand, but everybody should also listen to very carefully. Don't forget, if you want to listen to this as a podcast, I'll make sure it's available through Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts as well. Other than that, feel free to like, share, and subscribe this video, and we will see you next time.